I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging.
Being able to see these wines from these really high altitude, cool climate places in New South Wales, and seeing the peculiarities of textures and flavours and acid lines and all of these things that are coming through, it's super inspiring in terms of my approach to winemaking.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Alex Beckett is the head winemaker at Marnong Estate, located in the Sunbury region of Victoria's Port Phillip zone. After making waves in the Hunter Valley, Alex is now focused on cool climate winemaking and championing the region's potential. Hi Alex, thanks for joining me.
Hey Shanteh, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's been a while since we've kind of tasted some wine over a glass, but it is wonderful to have you on. I'm so thrilled for this. Well, it's not really a new appointment. You've been at Marnong for a little bit now, but I'm so excited that you're there and what you're doing with the estate. Let's go back a little, though, and let's talk about where you grew up and how everything started for you in wine.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess, I'm from the Hunter Valley originally, and went to school kind of around that kind of Maitland-Cessnock area, so very much so around families who were very involved in wine. But my background is very much so non-wine related. So I'm in my family, I'm literally the only person who drinks in the whole family, which is always interesting. But yeah, I guess it's one of those things of in high school, one of my best mates, his dad was the general manager of Drayton's Family Wines. And so kind of fell into doing little bits and pieces of vineyard work and cellar work around, year 11 and 12 as we kind of got to age, I guess. But my first love was actually language. So, I was obsessed with reading when I was in high school. My friends always just have to drag me out of the library, which is, geeky thing to say, but just really, really love words. So I went to uni to study applied linguistics, but was still working for Tyrrell's at the time. And I just remember being in the cellar door and having customers come in every weekend and just being like, why are these people always so happy? And that's what kind of drew me to it. I love the idea that not only is every drink different because every vintage is different, and Tyrrell's are one of those great businesses that obviously really look to express place, which was really cool to see when I was there, but it was also the connection with people. So it didn't really take long for me to kind of just shift tack and go, no, wine is what I really love. So I just changed careers and moved to Adelaide, learnt to make wine, hopefully, and then started making wine.
And would you call yourself one of those happy people now?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. What's not to be happy about?
Well, that's very true. I think it's interesting that you talked about your love of language and then that you happened to be at Tyrrell's cellar door of all places, because I think that one of my first memories was before I was in the industry and going to a tasting at Tyrrell's and being completely enamoured with the passion and the dedication of the people at the cellar door and how they told the story. And, I got wrapped up in it too, and I didn't know a thing about wine, but just listening to them talk about it, I was like, man, these people are so committed. Mm-hmm. Did you feel that when you were at Tyrrell's as well?
Absolutely. I think you can always judge a great business by the staff that are there and how long they've been there. And when I was in the cellar door there was two great people that I worked with. I mean, there was lots of great people that I worked with, but in terms of the established staff was Richard Earnshaw, so semi-retired cellar door manager, and Murray Flanagan, both who had been there for 40 years. And just the love for the business, the love for the wine, the love for their customers who would come in and see them every year. It's really hard not to fall in love with an industry when you see the level of almost familial relationship that they had developed with these customers, but also their passion for, growing the rest of the team's love of it. I remember distinctly every Sunday afternoon, Richard would go and get a bowl, sometimes from the museum, sometimes from his own cellar at home, and we'd sit outside under the old boa tree and, we'd open something and you'd just be talking about a wine that was usually 20 years old, and you'd be seeing it evolve in the glass. And we'd all be kind of just so excited about it. There was probably 3 guys and 1 girl who were all from high school with me, and we were all kind of there at the same time. And these blokes were probably responsible for all 3 of us, becoming addicted to the industry, which is shame on them, but shame on us, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's nice to learn that about you, that you have a love of language. I hope that you still keep that up, because there does come a point in our lives where we have to decide whether or not we keep it as a hobby or we, really go down a different route. Do you still read a lot?
Yeah, heaps. Yeah. I'm somewhat obsessive.
I love that. Books are just so amazing. And the opportunity just to get in and to go into a bookshop makes me happy. Mm-hmm. The quiet, the smell, all of those things. So I totally get it. Now, you work for Tyrrell's and then another iconic producer, Pepper Tree, John Davis, as well. Mm-hmm. What did you learn from your time in the Hunter?
I think primarily that, really that great wine is made in the vineyard. The Hunter Valley is an awesome place. It makes wines that are arguably some of the most unique in the world, just because of its very unique climate and condition. But the hard work of the vineyard team and the Hunter just cannot go unrecognised. You know what I mean? Like, we all like to talk about the glorious winemakers, which is great, but I just remember so many vintages of high rainfall and humidity, and seeing these guys work 7 days a week for months on end, and every year being so incredibly surprised and enamored by the quality of fruit that could be achieved in these places. Semillon's got the thinnest skins in the world. It's not exactly the most friendly grape variety for high humid environments. And yet we make such incredible wines in that location. You know what I mean? Probably my biggest lesson is just a real strong acknowledgement and love for viticulturists and what they can achieve.
That was so well said. I always think about the Hunter and the people and the place as being so iconically Australian. And I think it's one of the first places I visited, but seeing all these guys in, short shorts, out in the vineyard, and just be, then you see some, usually with pretty good legs, to be fair, like tanned legs and kangaroos jumping around, and you're just like, this is nowhere else in the world. It's absolutely just so iconically Australian that, and then you mentioned it, that hard work, that real labour intensive, you work hard, you play hard kind of attitude really is achieved in the Hunter Valley, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely got those vibes. And the minute you said the pins in the footy shorts, I was taken aback.
Maybe that's why I go back so often. No, just kidding. So you went and did your degree. You're working at Tyrrell's, you moved to Pepper Tree. You then were moved to Briar Ridge. These are pretty amazing places. And then you made a decision to move. How did that come about, and why?
It wasn't an easy decision, and it took a long time for me to make that decision. It was primarily for a few reasons. One, I'm so proud of what we achieved at Briar Ridge and Pepper Tree in those years. It was probably 7 years of really awesome team culture where we got to, create really unique stories of place on that Mount View vineyard, which is, in my opinion, one of the best places in the Hunter. It's lovely and elevated and makes really perfumed and elegant wine styles for the region. But something that was kind of, I suppose, cognizant to me is that I really, really love cool climate viticulture, and I really love cool climate Chardonnay. I love things that are really mineral and tense and poised. And so I'd always intended probably to move down south at some point. It was just going to be a bit of a matter of time. And this opportunity just happened to come up, which at face value, you look at Marnong as a brand and you don't immediately think of, super premium viticulture and all of that kind of stuff. And so when I came down here, I was perhaps a bit wary. But spending time with the owner and the rest of the guys in the business, it was one of those things where there's a true love of agriculture here and family agriculture, um, and a desire to do something which is truly unique or interesting, if you will. And that's my goal in life, right? I don't really want to make boring booze. I just really want to be in a region where you get to do something which is all about telling the story of a particular place and allowing those wines to really showcase something that is special, if you will. And I kind of saw this as a really great opportunity for that. Really young vineyard, really focused on high density Chardonnay and Pinot, but also really cool varieties like Fiano and Sange. So for me, it was kind of a logical next step in that I felt like at Briar we'd achieved so much, and I didn't really know if I could personally add more value to that business. Not that I felt like I truly understood the vineyard yet. I think there was still so many seasons where I would look at fruit that came in and go, I don't know what to do here. But, I was fortunate to have a really great team and awesome mentors around me to handle those things. But I was also at the point where I was really looking for the next stage of excitement and opportunity to really take a site and see what could be done with it. And this being such a young vineyard, there's just so much potential and opportunity here. So, yeah, it was just one of those things that was the next stage.
You say that so humbly, but you got a huge amount of awards while you were at Briar Ridge. And I think it's so humble of you to say, you didn't know if you could add more value in terms of where you're at in your career. That's not something I think anyone should say to their employee if they were listening. But I totally do get that creative part of you and that willingness to want to create and make change. And, Sunbury has always been a region that I had to often remind people about, especially sommeliers, of where it was and what they did. And it never really made a lot of sense to me because it's so close to Melbourne, cool, dry, maritime climate, beautiful rainfall, altitude. Like there's so much in Sunbury, and I feel that it just needs some really good champions of different ages as well to go in and just inject new life into it. But for me, it's always been a place that has wonderful fruit. So when your appointment came up, I was like, yes, this is so exciting. And I had a little look at the wines, and in particular, I have to say the 2024 Estate Pinot is phenomenal. And I had to triple check the back label 5 times to go, $25? $25? Is that right? And then I was like, surely that's, and then I went on the website and I was like, it's still $25 on the website. I think you've done an amazing job with that Pinot in terms of the layering and the bunch and everything to flesh out this quite giving, fruit forward but finessed wine at that price point. It's just outrageous. So well done.
Thanks so much, mate. Appreciate that.
I have sent it on to my beloved family members saying, get a case of this right now before I say anything on the podcast. And then, it's either all sold out or the price jacks up or who knows what. But a real steal and a real showstopper, your Reserve Pinot and also Sangiovese. I looked at that and thought, my gosh, where's this Sangiovese going to go? Because tell me a little bit about, before I get carried away myself, tell me a little bit about kind of when Marnong first put vines in, and a little bit about the estate.
No, totally. So, the vineyard was first planted in 2017. So it's kind of been an evolving project. We're still in the process of putting more vines in the ground now. So when the vineyard was first put in, it was done in collaboration with Mark O'Callaghan from One Network Consulting, who was just a tremendous guy in the industry and so insightful and knowledgeable. But the early days was thinking that this was going to be a great Shiraz vineyard, much like, Pat at Craiglee, who makes, as you know, some of Australia's best Shiraz wines. Mm-hmm. But very quickly realised that this particular site itself, it sits on this north-facing, hillside. It's, overlooks Mount Macedon. It's beautiful, but it's incredibly windswept and marginal. And we very early on realised that actually it's these more precise mineral varieties that are probably better suited to the property. So they started shifting tact and planting Pinot and Chardonnay instead, which I think has been the greatest decision made for this place, because the wine quality that I'm seeing from such young vines is super inspiring, to be honest. But the thing that I think is really important about this place is not only is it as a young vineyard, but it's such an aspirational business. You know, the family grew up here in Greenvale. They have amassed a relative amount of wealth in a single generation, which is great for them, but they also know that when they grew up around this area, there was never really anything that they could go to that they felt like was really special in this part of Melbourne. And so this whole project it's almost very community-led and community-focused. And that's one of the things that drew me to this place. So Dino, the owner, has always kind of said, I want this to be, well, I want the people who live around here to be able to come here and feel like it's their winery, which is a really great concept. And it's the reason why, to your point about the Pinot in terms of the price point, we don't want to make wines which are unachievable for people to drink. We want to make wines which are really incredible, but that are actually sitting in people's glasses. The people get to go to a cool wine bar in the city and they can afford a glass of it and still go, geez, isn't that really interesting? Isn't that really a wine that tells a story? And that's part of this place, is a family mentality of wine is for the table, wine is for sharing, wine is for family. And so this business is an ever-evolving business, which is probably not even halfway through its principal build on the site. You know, we're still looking at putting a hotel on the space, as well as a wellness centre and all of those kinds of things, to create more opportunities for people to come and just love this place as much as everyone else does. But by the same token, doing as many things which are free and for the community as well. So don't know if you've seen it, but once a month we do a petting zoo, which is pretty nuts. You usually get about 4,000 people here with their families and, you know, feeding the camels and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. And so it's kind of the mixed nature of the business, which is I find it the most interesting component of it. It's this idea that we want to be the best. We want to make incredible wines, but we want it to be for the people. And I love that.
It sounds like a very good place to kind of have a family and to kind of, well, have a young family. That's just the things that you're talking about, that the community mindness, the care for one another. It just sounds like a place that you would get up and move to start a family, in my opinion.
No, totally. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, this is one of the growth corridors of Melbourne. And the local community are really embracing this place. It's very rare that you can't come out here on a Sunday afternoon to see families picnicking out on the lawn. It's pretty incredible.
I haven't been out to the region, and I, slap myself on the wrist for that. But, being that it's so close to Tullamarine Airport and finding that journey into the CBD frustrating every time, because I'm so keen to get there and for that taxi ride to be over, I feel like this is just such a good segue to say, go the other way and get out to a winery first, come and see what you're doing out there, and then go back in and get to the hubbub and the fast-paced life of what you need to do in Melbourne.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about, the lessons and the changes you had to make in your own kind of mindset of winemaking, coming from a more moderate climate to a cooler climate.
That's a really interesting question. I suppose my approach has always been try and make the wine in the least intense way possible. That's probably not the right wording. I kind of more mean I don't like wines which feel like an imprint has been put upon them. I prefer to see wines which kind of are a true reflection of the place they come from, which I know that, the vast majority of great winemakers in Australia feel the same way. And it's one of those things that we all really share, which is this great love of place. And so when I moved from the Hunter, which to your point in terms of a moderate climate, I think the challenge there was always, and challenge maybe isn't the right word either, but you always had these really full flavoured wines. And so much of the winemaking was about how can we preserve the intensity and concentration of lovely fruit character, but pull it back a little bit, just kind of make sure that there's some framework around it that builds the layers of interest without distracting from that lovely fruit profile. Whereas here it's almost the opposite. The intensity is there in the fruit, but it's so delicate and restrained and pared back that so much of what I see my role here being is about how can I hold off on the artifact? How can I make sure that that wine fruit quality is seen in every glass? And it's been super interesting for me in terms of I've almost had to learn how to make wine again, which is kind of crazy, but it's so fun and exciting at the same time. The thing that I really love about it is the thirst-quenching nature of cool climate wine. The linear levels of acidity that are just bracing and refreshing in spades. And being able to capture that is pretty fun, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that that's what I saw in looking at those two Pinots. I suppose that, estate Pinot, I could see the ability of yours in crafting a wine that offered, really good detail and a spectrum of flavors, but generosity. And then in the single vineyard, I saw real, hands up vineyard in that wine and delicacy and subtleties. And for me, that makes a lot of sense in terms of a marketing point of view or of what you're offering people. Draw them in with this wine that just over delivers for its price point, and then introduce them to the special sites that you have and why they look like that. And I just thought this makes a lot of sense to me, but also, really rewards the consumer that then is paying attention and then says, you know what, I'm going to buy a case of that 24 Pinot. I'm going to buy that estate every year, and then I'm going to, pay a bit more attention and decide whether I, buy a 6-pack here or a bottle of that or a bottle of this. So, that's definitely what I see. Your ability to want to just learn these sites and let them speak, which is really cool.
Thanks, mate.
I want to talk a little bit about your work as well in New England, just because I wondered, doing some work in New England and New South Wales in an area that, I wish had more people like yourselves doing fun things like you are with Origins and Jantaboski. But did your experience of working there kind of encourage you to work in a place that was a little bit more of an up-and-comer? And I know that, like Pat Carmody, they'll just hate me for saying that, but did your experience in New England kind of influence you at all into moving to Sunbury?
Definitely. Yeah, undoubtedly. The Origin project has been one of the most interesting things in my life for a while now. I was really fortunate that this is an opportunity that I get to do. And it's one of those things of when you start to make wines which are from places that don't have necessarily the plethora of examples to look at to kind of go, oh, okay, this is what this region looks like. That's when you start to get really intrigued, I find, because you don't really know, which means that you're not walking in there with I suppose, any prejudice against any particular flavors or textures which might appear. So you're not intrinsically thinking, oh, that shouldn't be there, because you don't know. And so when we started to make Chardonnay from New England first, and now we're making Chardonnay from Murray Bateman, Orange and Tumbarumba as well, being able to see these wines from these really high altitude, cool climate places in New South Wales, and seeing the peculiarities of textures and flavors and acid lines and all of these things that are coming through. It's super inspiring in terms of my approach to winemaking, and it's definitely had a major impact in terms of, I suppose, shifting and transitioning down to here. Sunbury, jokingly about Pat, but it is one of those things. It's the Cragley Vineyard was one of the first sites planted in Australia in the 1800s, and yet, obviously it's a replant now, but it's not a new region, but it's a region which hasn't been loved for such a long time. And particularly for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, there's an opportunity there to just kind of go, well, what is the character of this place? Because you see it on a bench now, the wines that we make alongside wines from the Yarra or Macedon or Mornington, and it doesn't look like those wines, which is awesome. That's what we want, right? We want wines that genuinely have a characteristic of place, and that's really exciting to me.
There's, I think, a real inquisitiveness about the way that you work, and I think that you can see that through what your work with Origins, but now also in this new venture at Manong. And I just think that is something that's so wonderful. It's nice to go on the ride with you, especially, your love of Chardonnay and your kind of development through, being in the Hunter and New England and now being down in this completely other region. I think just really exciting stuff. What are you most excited about that you're working with at Marnong at the moment? And what do you see the future of the estate really championing in terms of varieties?
I think that Chardonnay and Pinot will always be at the forefront of our story. I mean, I'm finding that the site is very, very well suited to these varieties. And we're increasing the clonal mixture on the site as well to try and see if we can find even more detail from the place as well. But the thing that probably excites me the most is the Sangiovese. I'm sure that everyone all feels the same way in terms of there's certain varieties that came to Australia that feel like they've underperformed in a way for a really long time. And we are fairly confident now, I think, as an industry, that a lot of that comes down to the selection of material that came into Australia in the early days. And now that there's higher quality clones in situ and it's being treated probably a little bit more, I suppose, correct to style in the vineyard, we're starting to see wines which are far more elegant, far more, I suppose, interesting and intriguing as along the way. And so we've got a couple of high-density Sange plantings now on the estate. And the first vintage we made really, really simply. And it was one of those things of just wanting to see what it looked like. And I just distinctly remember thinking to myself, what is this? Like there's colour and there's layers of tannin and beautifully fresh red fruits and bay leaf herbals, and just going, I personally haven't ever made Australian Sange that looks like that. And just going like the level and intensity of that tannin line, it reminds me of, almost Brunello-like tannin. And so that's been a big, massive shift in mentality for us, is that we've started to change. We've invested in, clay and concrete, and we've got some great gamba casks, and we're putting Sange into these things so that we can start to explore the detail of that variety in a cool climate style. And so I think that that's probably going to be the most interesting project for us, is what can we do with Sangiovese off this property? It's got... what is it? Italy's probably most planted red grape variety. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm sure it's close to it. But it's such a great grape variety. And it would be really great to see what it can do in the Australian climate when it's really cared for with attention and detail. So, yeah, that's probably the thing that we're most excited about.
Yeah, that was kind of a crazy, as soon as I poured it in the glass, I was like, whoa, like this looks like it's just come out of the press. It was crazy colour, and then just so primary fruit, but right with that herbal edge. And the first thing I did think was, I wonder what clones these are, because it like you said, there's a couple, maybe some Canberra stuff as well. That so what other clones are you using of Sangiovese, or it's okay if you don't want to say?
No, that's fine. So they're Chalmers selections. It's the Mat 6 and Mat 7 that we've got on the property.
Okay.
And, they crop heavily. They're very abundant in terms of their vigour, but they tend to form these bunches which are quite compact, and, even the berry size, even though it's relatively large in comparison to most French varieties, I find that there seems to be an affinity for tannin and anthocyanin development. So, like, the minute we started, treating this in the winery and trying to treat it really respectfully, almost like Pinot, you could just see this colour and tannin start to evolve in the must, and you were kind of just like, I just didn't realize that this is what was going to happen. You know what I mean? Sange to me has always been that thing of, yeah, the tannin is there and it's definitely prominent. But in Australian Sange, I've never really seen that as an identifying feature of them. So really, really interesting for me to see these wines come through.
Well, it sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy. I do want to know a little bit about kind of who you look to for inspiration and motivation where you are now. Are you still in contact, with people from the Hunter, or have you found a real new community of winemakers and people in the industry in Sunbury?
Oh, honestly, it's such a diverse mix. I'm such a fan of so many people in this industry all trying to do great things. From days in the Hunter, people like Liz Silkman and Stu Horton and Liz Riley in terms of vineyards, and, just people who are so passionate about creating incredible wines, and year after year, continuous improvement and trying to achieve better expressions of place is really important to me. But then by the same token, one of the great things about living in Victoria is that there's a plethora of incredible people in the industry here, all from, Latho and Mel at Giant Steps to Crowley at Yarra Yaring. And, I'm fortunate I get to work with Mark O'Callaghan and Steve Flamstead, and Adam Keith and Glenn Thompson, and just, amazing people. And then, someone who was really great mentor to me through the Wine Communicators Australia program was Julian Langworthy. And, I credit him so strongly with how I think and feel about certain wine styles. So, yeah, I could just keep on going. There's just so many incredible winemakers and viticulturists in Australia who inspire me every day.
I love that. Let's not blow too much smoke up Jules's ass, though, because we won't be able to put up with him. I'd love to know a little bit more about your palate as well. Alex, if you could only have 3 drinks for the rest of your life today, and what would they be and why?
I think I fall into the trap of every winemaker in that it takes a lot of great beer to make great wine. So, just full flavoured Australian lager. I was converted to the Great Reshes a few years back by a guy I was working with, so silver bullet cans, and that's probably a day-to-dayer. But as you know, I'll always kind of return to Chardonnay that's made with precision and restraint, wines that really are a lens to place. I love those varieties which have tension and purity and structure. So it's got to be there for sure. And then the last one being probably a Churchill Martini.
A Churchill Martini. I love it. That's the first time anyone said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I made a martini last night for myself. I think I was watching something and someone made one. And I was like, oh, yep, that's what I need right now. And I thought, what day is it? It's a Wednesday? Who cares? Excellent choices. That did surprise me. But 3 drinks that anybody could get on board with. I have learned a bit more about you, which I'm thrilled of. And like I said, I think that Manong's in such good hands. I'm really excited to see what you do. And thank you for making the time to chat with me. I really appreciate it, Alex.
No, thank you, mate. Really love being here and having a chat with you.
Awesome. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.